Good afternoon, everyone. BC Richfield here, coming to you live from London. It's just gone a couple of minutes past midday here, making it making it an hour earlier, in fact, for UTC. So 1100 just gone in UTC. A really big shout out to everybody joining the stream live today, as well as everybody watching it on recording. We're getting lots of lovely messages from people, which is great to hear, as well as a big shout out to all of our existing and new community members over at the Bird Nest. Lots of you taking advantage of the spring sale. So it's just awesome to just see loads of you in there learning, asking questions, having those kind of, epiphany moments, which is why I think we do what we do. I think it's why, people that enjoy teaching do what they do. Anyway, Milad Trade, hello, mate. Thank you for the heart emojis. I appreciate that. Yeah, wishing everyone a really, really good day today. So we got quite a lot to cover today. Obviously, you can see on the chart we got Bitcoin, but it is our Alt Request Wednesday, meaning that you guys can let me know what you would like to see charted. All right. And we will make time for that without any problem whatsoever. So let's take a very quick look to start. With the news, obviously very, very, very important to understand the key points of volatility and volume that can be entering into the day, right? So as an intraday trader, which I am, hang on, let me turn my effing Discord off because it is going mad. There we go. As an intraday trader, what I'm trying to find is key catalysts in the market that can make stocks move, or crypto, obviously all inclusive, move with impulse, with impetus, with purpose, right? Because it's a lot easier if we find a key point that we can either counter trade, meaning that we find ourselves in a consolidation, which is one of my favorite moves. We sweep to the offside and then we get that expansion. So a range trade turning into a continuation play, or to just jump on board with a trend. And we're going to take a look at both of those scenarios today. So just before we get on to that, let's take a look at the news today. We didn't really get any major impact from the JOLTS job openings yesterday. Our focus is on the US market, very much the biggest market in the world. Obviously I know there's other markets, European market, China, etc., growing, great, amazing, but the US dollar is the world's reserve currency and therefore affects all of those other countries, in a huge way. And the best way that I was ever kind of told in my early days of kind of understanding that is, if you imagine with the US, when goods are bought in dollars, then those dollars have to be traded back into the currency of the countries that use them, right? So even when countries are selling dollars, it's still putting, it's still making the dollar very, very active. All right. Anyway, as we look on to today, we're Wednesday, 4th of June. What are the key things that we're looking at today? All right. Now, this is an interesting one here. ADP non-farm employment change, right? So this is showing the employment change across the US, not including the farming industry. All right. So this is a really interesting one, right? Because the previous was 62,000 and the current is 111. Let's take a look to see historically what the last few prints have been like. Have they been accurate? Have they been missing them? Let's see. So the April print that came in what did we have? So April 30th, previous was 147, forecast was 114. It was actually down 62, which is really, really interesting, right? So it's basically, it's to change the number of employed people, right? So, excluding the farming industry, that's pretty ugly print. This is a good print, which is normally good for the dollar, right? So we see that on April 2nd, 118,000 was projected, or forecast, sorry, they got 155,000. So that's a lot better. Again, you're looking for this to be an indication, a leading indication, of strength and health in the economy. Are they getting enough jobs? Job openings was telling us yesterday there were more jobs than expected. So that's good if we can see that with an uptick in non-farm employment change, especially if it's up from 62k to 111k. Things could really kind of fire off in the markets today. That's the way that we're looking at it, all right? Aside from that, there's no major news catalyst today, but we are in earnings season, so we really do need to be aware of companies, especially in the technology space. This is for those of you who are very crypto-focused, of course, in the technology space, because that kind of directly plugs in, obviously the Magnificent Seven. You're looking at stocks like Nvidia, for example. We've already obviously had Nvidia earnings, but they're the kind of things that you want to be watching out for. Anyway, I won't go into it any more than that. We've got a lot to cover on the show today. I know this is very much the crypto focused show that we do of the week, so let's get ourselves back to Bitcoin. And if you would like any tokens, any assets, any whatever you guys call them, tokens, pairs, assets, instruments, which we call on the traditional markets. But if there's anything you want to take a look at, then please do let me know in the comments. We've already had requests for ETH, BTC, AXGT, Crediva, AIS, Solana. So if you have got any, let me know the ticker in the chat and we will take a look. But we're going to start here on Bitcoin, right? So, and I've left that on there because I want to show you this trade that I absolutely paper-handed. So super clean chart here. Ignore this little bit. We'll obviously zoom in on this, but basically what we're looking for is key support resistance breakouts. If those come in, obviously, with a rise in volume, like we saw here, ignore them. I don't know why this moving average keeps popping up on here. Hang on. Really don't like looking at that on there. I hate it here. How are we doing, my friend? Anthony, hello, mate. Good to see you. So what we can see here, right? Look at the rising volume. Lovely. What we're really looking for within any key kind of breakout. Look, bosh, 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 right? Beautiful. You can see since then kind of volume's been up and down, but that's, a little bit of the nature of the beast. We saw volume starting to rise here when we had this confirmed breakout. Obviously, volume's one of those things, that looks a little bit better in hindsight, but unless you can get those really nice kind of moves, like this one here, for example, where if we're just drawing along the highs of the candle, we can see a really, really clean, obviously, apart from the drawing of it moving up. Capo total. Okay, Luciano Soria, welcome to the show. So as we're looking at this here, we're just going to turn the volume off at the moment just to get a little bit of extra screen space. Look, price came up. What does price do? Price basically expands, consolidates, expands. Yeah. And then you're just trying to work out whether you're looking at accumulation or distribution, right? Distribution to the downside, accumulation for price to pump. We had this move down here. A lot of people, myself included, were looking towards a retest of this kind of level here. All right. The reason for that quite simply being that, this whole consolidation area here wasn't really retested. It got front run here, but we could tell the price was doing quite well because we came back down, we'd taken out that swing. We had the swing failure here. We set the order block here. We got the expansion above these highs here. Big, beautiful, strong, big body candle. And when you look higher, you're just looking for what's clear and obvious. And one of the things that's tricky about trading price discovery is that, you're using everything from Fibonacci extensions to looking for round numbers, 120K, 125K, 130K, 150K, because you don't really have any other data to go on. So as we're kind of looking at this, Anthony, so we've got this high here, obviously the all-time high on a weekly scale. This candle is now closed, so this makes this a confirmed high. That is obviously the main target here for the bulls. Now, to really just keep things broken down, to keep things super simple, I really don't like to overcomplicate things. What does the daily chart tell me here, right? So, sorry, the weekly chart. We've got the weekly gap down here. That was an area, if we continue to break down, that's where I'd be looking initially to get on board with more bids. All right. Now, while we're up here, I'm not just looking to actively long into this. It's just ridiculous. We're just stuck up at resistance at the moment. So we just want to be careful in terms of what the candles tell us. Look at the large bodies here, expansion. Yeah, consolidation, large expansion. Now, what can be really interesting to monitor here is how price engages with the prior highs of the candles. Yeah, so you notice here, here, and here, price closing above the prior candle's high. All right, now we're looking at that almost akin to a range. Yeah, liquidity below the low, liquidity above the high. So when you break out of these, as long as you're holding that, then we're expecting expansion at least to the weekly high, which we got here. Now, what the keen-eyed amongst you will notice is that last week was the first week that we had a down close candle, right? It didn't close below the low of the candle. It didn't take the high of the candle, meaning we're in a weekly inside bar pattern. You can find out more about that on my Twitter page. It's pinned to the top, but basically it's a range within a range. The high and low of this candle, yeah, when this week closed, becomes the inner range. The high and the low of this candle become the outer range. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to look for a little bit more context on the daily chart. All right, so as we move down to the daily here, I'm going to show you this in a minute. It was a good idea in premise, but I talked myself out of it for a very, very small profit. And again, you can see this on my Twitter: shares, wins, losses, break evens, and the rest of it. Everything is obviously transparent because, well, it just otherwise it's a bit pointless, isn't it? Really, you know, anybody can just post charts and say, "Look what I did yesterday." So as we're in here, this at the moment just again isn't really filling me with the idea of this is where I want to trade this. All right, so if I'm looking across here, we have a little bit of a tight range. Yeah. So we had this kind of range here led to this expansion. And now we're back in this range here, really. Yeah. This is where price was chopping around. Strong breakout above these highs. And then price moved away. But now we're back in this area here, right? And actually something that's quite interesting is this was the last down candle here, right? The last bearish candle. And if I just focus on the body of this and draw this across here, we can see what significance it's played, right? Because this led to the expansion to the highs. Price came in and found support in this area here. Still didn't close below it here. But when it did here, this whole area has kind of become resistance. You would look at it almost like a point of mitigation, right? If, you know, SC was very, very vocal in this in the early years, and I learned a lot from him over FX trading, right? And looking at these prior key consolidations, right, and bringing everything together. If the buyers were stepping in here before, if the buyers are now offside, when price reaches back into these areas, it gives them the opportunity to mitigate, to get out of their positions, to cover, etc. Meaning that that's when you normally then see that continuation a little bit lower. On the daily chart at the moment, again, what would I really want to see? I like to see reactions if I want to get back on board with a trend, right? Or if I think that a new trend is starting. Because ultimately, for me, on a daily scale here, we've set the higher high, higher low, lower high. We're now setting a lower low, right? Price has got a lot of work to do to get back above here. Not saying that it's not possible. We do want to look at the alignment of risk markets. Okay, like I said, typically I'm looking at things from an intraday basis. That's what I trade. That's my specialty. Okay, so what we're going to do is just try and decant where we are. And all I'm saying here, right, is that I'm not. I'm just looking for things that are clear and obvious. If I'm not seeing that on the weekly, right, because I want to look and I want to pay respect to the highest time frame. Excuse me for a moment while I just stir my tea. Didn't quite have time to get off of the desk this morning and across here with a pre-made brew. So it's been brewing by the side while I while I continue the show. So this is where we are. Well, let me move this out of the way. Beautiful. So if I'm not seeing anything clear and obvious on the weekly, right, and what would be clear and obvious? So clear and obvious would be, you know, have we swept a low? Have we taken liquidity to move higher? Because I'm asking myself, where the hell is price reacting from here? What I do like is we kind of, you know, the trend line workers would do this better than me, right? But we kind of, I think, if I was to look at this, just kind of notice this really, maybe we're not, but if we were to take this from the wicks of these candles, that looks particularly... just trying to line it up with these ones here. You know, support for the higher low, support for the higher low. We did dip below, we come back above this, and we do seem to be finding support in this area. So again, something that's kind of angling on. But if I've got to go through all that work, right, all of a sudden I can put a line anywhere on this chart, to be honest, and probably give it some context. So what does that mean? It means that I just want to move Solana, yeah, of course, I hate it here, no problem. I just want to move down to a lower time frame, right? So now I'm going to move down to a 4-hour chart, and I'm saying, okay, well, what's going on the 4-hour chart? The reason that I like this long here is we had equal lows, right? We'd done a couple of things here as well, and this is what's really important. I want things to be strikingly obvious to me, okay? Strikingly obvious. Jeremy Irons says it in Margin Call. Imagine you were speaking to a child or a golden retriever, right? That's how simple I want this to be. I'm not here because I'm MIT graduate. I'm not here because I'm the smartest person in the room. I'm here, in truth, because I work incredibly hard. But this is an industry full of incredibly hardworking people, right? So that's the bar that you've got to set. Anyway, price expands higher, we get a nice pullback, right? What are we looking for? We're looking for, on a lower time frame almost, you would consider this a bull flag, right? Or a falling wedge, yeah? So what are we looking for? We're looking for expansion, consolidation, expansion, consolidation. This one's a little bit ugly. I wouldn't say that was really a flag in there, but I would say that these are, yeah. I'm just going to draw these in here, and then we can look at them on the lower time frame, right? And a lot of you will be thinking, Jesus, BC, we very rarely see you draw these things in. So I don't really like the charts to be too messy, right? And I also, not like you can get that on there at the moment. I also don't like to kind of speak about things that I don't do daily, but I do look at this on the higher time frame. Are we respecting the consolidation? Are we pumping? Are we holding key levels? So what did this mean to me? It meant that this whole move here was a little bit out of sorts, because when we have an expansion, I like to see gapping, right? Gapping is just telling me that there was no real order pairing there. So it's showing that there's, an excitement or there's large buying coming in, right? Doesn't necessarily mean the volume, the number of buyers, but there's a lot of volume coming into the market. There's a lot of buy orders coming in, a lot of bids, right? So it just gaps up. It's that excited bid. Then the market likes to rebalance these areas. That's why they're called inefficiencies. Then we see the expansion. So we didn't get any gapping in this move higher, but we are in this beautiful step pattern, and we can see we've got liquidity resting above from within these lows here, from within the gaps that exist over here in our high time frame levels. So when we came back down to this area here, these equal lows, which I'll show you on the lower time frame, were a really good opportunity. I said if we get a nice reaction down at these lows, we're holding a bullish gap, then this is an area I would look to take a trade. Okay, so we're going to pop this down onto the 15-minute. This just giving you the context here. We can see how nice, bull and bear flags here, bull flags coming in here, right? We would then, for the lower time frame, we would adjust these like so. All right, and then ultimately what you're looking for are these high volume breakouts of these areas. Anyway, just so that you can kind of encapsulate, because on a higher time frame, how clean that looks, then you move on to the lower time frame, there's a lot of noise, right? And then all of a sudden people see this initial breakout and they're wondering, is it coming from this high, this high? It's actually the consolidation line, and it can be a signal that price is ready to move. So what was I looking at down here? Really simply, price was coming into here. We have tweezer bottoms here, which are basically almost perfectly equal bottoms. Price came in holding this level here, right? What else were we doing? We were holding it beautifully on the hourly as well, right? So again, tweezer bottoms here. And then I posted out that I want to see a large expansion in this move here, right? In this case, we took the close above the inversion gap, right? So expecting this to offer resistance. What do we get, right? One of my favorite patterns, and yes, it's a little bit messy for you traditionalists on this, which I appreciate. So I do apologize in advance before you give me shit in my DMs. But this is very similar to a morning star pattern, right? Where you have a large expansion candle down, a doji candle, and then a large expansion candle up that closes above the 50% of this. Unfortunately, we were slamming straight into a bearish gap at that time. So I said I didn't really like. So I said I just want to see some more momentum through here, right? We got a nice pin bar candle here and a nice pin bar candle here as well. And what you'll notice here is I closed here on the second pin bar. Yeah, that's where I opened the position, sorry. And actually I was, in terms of this with the stop loss here, I was putting it below the body of the thrust candle, which was this candle that came up and set the morning star pattern. But ultimately, you can put it below the swing low. Now, I pussied out of the trade here, right? So you can see all of that on Twitter. Why did I bail out of this trade here? We had equity markets starting to roll over. We had some news events coming in. And I decided that discretion is the better part of valor. I'm a very risk-averse trader, right? Obviously, over time does hurt my reward to risk, but it does mean that I normally have a higher win rate than most. So typically balances out. What I learned many years ago was that actually, rather than kind of chasing the maximum profits and causing myself to almost have heart attacks every day holding swing trades through the night, it's just not who I particularly am as a person, right? I am a very up person, a little bit ADHD, very, very active. I like to talk a lot. I like to socialize a lot, etc. So I realized that actually what I want to do is be able to get in and out of positions quite quickly. And I decided I didn't want to be holding this through the night. However, had I made that decision, then I would have been looking along here for a secondary catalyst, right? And I want to be looking on at least a 15-minute scale for this. So if I was looking to get back into this move, for example, what do I want to see? Remember, exactly the same principles we were talking about before. Where is the clean and obvious? Here, right? Just a big bullish gap here. Now, you might think, yeah, but how do you know that's not going to fail? Well, if it does fail, we close below it, then I'm pretty sure it's going to chase out these lows. So this becomes my condition, yeah? You can use order blocks, or consolidations as well. The issue that I have with that is often when you get these breakouts of these areas, you get these large expansion candles that really hurts your risk to reward. So each to their own. How ugly does that bull flag, by the way, look on the 15-minute. Anyway, so that's the area there. So the green box, we're going to revisit that now. We're going to look at that again. I would normally enter lower than a 5-minute, but often on crypto, it's a little bit of a tricky one going in under 5. All right. So what are we looking for here? Well, we're looking for liquidity to be swept. Now, I like to see really clean liquidity sweeps here. This wasn't the cleanest, right? We'll look at it on the lower time frames as well. But what I typically, well, not typically, what I do is if I'm looking for a liquidity sweep and then I want to get in when this high is closed above, I used to call it the breaker candle. My dear friend and wonderful co-trader over at the Bird Nest, who's a wonderful part of my trading team over there at Resume, actually has a wonderful way of entering these. When you set a new low, you look for the consolidation to set the low, which is exactly what I'm doing here, right? So what am I doing? I'm taking the up candle here, right? I'm waiting for a sweep of the low. Now, I prefer to see wicks below this and the bodies close above. But what this tells me here is this drive down could well be manipulation, right? Could well be a move to get people offside, shift structure to the downside. But if it's recovered within the next 1 or 2 candles, and we see that here, then I'm looking to step back in. Then I want to see an initial change in delivery, right? Meaning that I want to see an order block set within here. I see the order block set, get the expansion, close above here, limit order set, retested next candle, stops below the order block. Okay, that's how you can step back in. We could have, for example, taken the same entry down here, I would imagine. Okay, you'd have had a worse risk to reward, but what did we get in here? We had a sweep on a low. Look how quickly the lows recovered. This all has the context of being aligned with high time frame levels. This is a 15-minute gap. These are hourly and 4-hourly equal lows. Look at the wicks. The wicks are showing you absorption here. You're expecting at least a bit of a pop. A lot of people will shy away from taking these moves because they think, I might just get to here and reverse. It might do, right? But you got to be looking at the high time frame context, all right? So with this one again, what are we looking for? Move lower. I then want to see a strong expansion. I want to see buyers stepping in here. And actually, this initial move here is you get a little gap in here, right? It's the long downside wicks I like about this. So let's say we follow the same principle here. What are we looking for, right? We're looking at the up candle here. I typically focus on the body of these, by the way, the body of the up candle, not just the wick, all right? So, because you can just get some really abnormal wicks sometimes. If you get a really long upside wick here, I'd be a little bit concerned because it's showing a lot of sell pressure, but this is okay. We get the breakout from here, limit orders set on there. You've got a wide stop on this, right? But in crypto, that's not the end of the world. Remember what I said, below the order block here, right? Why? Because these 3 consecutive candles, when they're closed above, become an order block, right? So there, we've got double confluence here. Now, yes, we've got a wide stop. Yes, price did get a little bit ugly and come back down into here for 1,000,001 reasons that we could talk about now, right? Why it did that, you never really know. Could be manipulation, could be weakness in the market. Maybe there wasn't the volume coming in, etc., right? But ultimately, we had the targets. That's how you can get involved in these trades. So now, as we run through, I know that's taken a little bit longer, but now as we run through the rest of the chart, you can understand what we're looking at, right? Prices eventually kind of held over here. So now we have the context behind that. Let's look and analyze Bitcoin, where it is today and what our plan is for it, all right? So we know there's not a lot of information on the daily and the weekly at the moment. Both, in my opinion, are still pretty strong. The daily is a little bit more bearish, right? But so just to put that back in context, what are we looking at? Yeah. What's the key thing in here, right? This is why I'm here on the daily, right? This is what I'm looking at. So let me just hide these bits as well. We don't need them now. Right. This is where we are. Sharp move down. This low, right? If you come back, I think on Monday's live show, we were talking about this here. They're looking for the retest of this level. That's the last low before price broke down. We had a lot of volume coming down below. That's a retest of this area after shorting until proven otherwise. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. This is just on an intraday basis. This is just trying to catch those nibbles of reactions. All right. That's because in a similar theory, people who were long here, people who had their stops below here have been hunted. People that are holding this into drawdown are now back at a rough area of where they can mitigate their risk, right? So if they were long in here, they'll think, right, I'll take half the position size off, or I'll close out completely. And then often you see people step back on board with the trend. So as we look at this, there's not really tons of information here. This is the bearish order block, so we're drawing this across, right? This was the bullish gap that when closed below here, we haven't seen a retest. For me, this area here is fairly strong resistance, right? So I actually need to see price on a higher time frame back above this, yeah, and back above this. It's the only time I'll really consider taking positional play longs on Bitcoin, right? Unless we get back down to these levels. At the moment, we're just in the middle of nowhere, right? So to get more context, and the more context I need, I move to the lower time frames. As I move to the lower time frames, I have to expect a little bit more erratic price action, right? So we've got the high time frame levels. We've seen the initial rejection here. So I've got to ask myself, what's supporting price? What's clear and obvious in here, right? That we can build a set of conditions around. And it's this gap. This gap's supporting price at the moment, right? If we close below this gap, then I'm targeting these lows. All right. It's as simple as that. If this shows weakness and we close below it, then I'm looking in the other direction, right? In the same way that this gap supported price all the way through here. Yeah, so I've now got a clean set of instructions, right? These don't always work. We can, for example, see up here, yeah, what happened? We had a bearish gap here. So when price closed above this, remember, if we didn't have the daily context here, we remove this from the chart at the moment, imagine the purple boxes and their prices closed above this gap, making it an inversion gap, and meaning that I'm looking to long off of that to highs, right? As an initial move. And then I wait for further confirmation to move higher. So I get stopped out on the longs in this instance, yeah? Price then, well, or you probably wouldn't actually in truth get any long positions from this because price moved down so aggressively. However, when price moved down and through here, we violated this again, meaning that we're now pretty confident price is seeking liquidity lower. All right. Why? Because if this was violated to move higher and it's not being used as support, this isn't buyers stepping in this candle. This is a manipulation candle to squeeze and trap buyers so that it can be sold off and liquidity can be taken lower. Right. And if we want to look at that in premise of how it works over here, just to give you another example. Yeah. What was this? Big, beautiful bullish gap, offered support here. We close below it. Price comes back in again, nips its head above. But then when you're back below here, then, it's doing its job. And you can get these slithers of closes, especially on crypto. You do see it less in the indices with things like the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, etc., because just the volume, the amount of money running through those markets does tend to be a bit cleaner. Anyway, so while we're here, I'm not looking to actively short this gap. Now, I'm bringing my time frames down here to a point that I could swing this potentially. So if we look at it on a 15-minute, what would I need to see on a 15-minute scale? Well, first of all, I want to make sure that I'm trading within a new trading day. I want to take a look at the charts here and kind of say, okay, well, what's going on here from a point of support and resistance, all right? And if I'm really looking locally, right, because this is a little bit kind of messy through here, there's maybe a line here, maybe. Right, something like this. Right, resistance, breakout, lose the level, sells off, gets back above, retest here, price pumps, closes back beneath the level, deviation back above, support, deviation, support, pump, support, pump. Now it's starting to lessen off a little bit, right? But for me, I need to see really, really clear SR through here, and I don't really have it, right? I'd actually say, if anything, the support and resistance level here is lower. I would say it's around about here. We can see really, really good catalysts off of this level, right? I always try and anchor to a key point that's like the body or the wick, right? But looking through here, look, deviation, large sell-off. This area again, sell-off, right? What happened here? We deviated this, climbed above, decent pump here. We get back below here, yeah? Price sells off. Then when it gets back above, look how when it holds this level, we see this big expansion. So we're still a little bit away from that, and I'm much more focused on the gap here. However, if I want to be bullish today, looking at this intraday on the 15-minute, quite simply, I just want to see this hold. Right, if we've got the bullish gap here, we're just decanting exactly the same information that we've taken on the daily, the 4 hour, right, and we're moving through the time frames here. We've got big support coming in here. Now, if this doesn't hold, yeah, and we close below this, then my assumption is that we're going to flush out these lows. However, I don't want to actively short this today, because within this big bloody green box, we assume that there's a lot of buying going on, right? Or the opportunity. Why do we assume that? Well, let's look what happened when we created the box. Buying here, buying here, buying here. What's to stop price sweeping this out lower and then recovering? However, if we don't need that liquidity, that will be a sign of strength. We've had a nice expansion here, all right? So now looking from this perspective, in here, we could look for longs on a lower time frame, all right? We might see some clearer, higher time frame stuff on some of the other instruments that we're going to take a look at, which we're going to focus a lot more on the higher time frame. But for me, if I'm looking to be active on Bitcoin today, yeah, we can see the weakness in the charts at the moment. It's telling me that we're probably going to need to see reactions lower down, all right? And then if you want to look for those, you know, obviously I'm not just setting limit orders at random points here. I'm looking for price to engage with levels, see that reaction, and then step in off of that. For example, this low here, when price came down, what did we do? Support, deviate this, close back above it here. You can enter on the engulfing candle that set the order block, and then look to trade it higher. Ultimately, with that trade, I would be looking to target something like those highs as a scalp trade. At the minute, price isn't in a position where I'm looking to swing this. How do I know that? Because of the analysis that we did on the higher time frames. I'm not going to take swing trades into immediate resistance. Right, so let's contextualize that further, and let's look on our other charts, because the reason that I do take time to explain that is because I do get a lot of messages from you guys. So why are we short on ETH now, Milad? I mean, I'm not short on ETH, but let's take a look, shall we? And again, different traders. If you're talking about over at the Bird Nest, it's I don't think the team is short. I mean, I can check to see if there's anything been opened up, but ultimately, I wouldn't, you know, for my system, I wouldn't be short Ethereum here unless we're at key resistance, and we are, right? So if we look at this up here. Right, and the reason we use this is just the crypto charts, because it's got all of our TA on it that we've been, you know, going through on these live shows for months and months and months, maybe even years actually. So this was the order block here. This was the key level. We just saw consistent rejections here, right? Let me clear this. This was the bull flag we were talking about. We got the bull flag breakout. We did take out the high. Great, it worked. TA, wonderful. No point leaving it on there now, just because if it hadn't worked, I'd be more inclined to leave it on there so we can learn from it. But ultimately, it was just a trade setup that's kind of muddying up the charts at the moment. Right, we're going to leave these on here because I imagine they'll have some context on the lower time frame. We were looking for the reaction down that low, which we got. We got the large expansion. Right, now we're holding this. Aussie, how you doing, mate? Good to have you with us. So, look, this was the up move before price sold off, and this was an aggressive sell-off in an area that wasn't retested, right? Again, you don't have to believe this is true or not, but one of the easier ways to kind of conceptualize this is to think to yourself, all right, if we've got this is the up close here before price sold off aggressively, yeah, then if you were a buyer in here and you did have, I don't want to say if it's balls or gumption or a few screws loose to hold this through drawdown, when price comes back to here, you can ask yourself the question of, how wrong am I? Do I think this is going long again? A lot of the time what will happen is we will see price come away from these levels, come back to it, yeah, and then you see those initial positions. Either that, or remember, people that were long from down here need a place, a clear and obvious place, and these prior consolidations do tell us a lot. either way, we saw consistent rejections here. However, at the moment, this is just expansion and this is just a consolidation, right? So now from here, we would look, for price to drive higher. Aside from that, the gap remains the same. That's our weekly bullish gap that we've got below us. We haven't tested into that. I did think that when we saw, especially this second rejection candle here, that price would kind of come down here and move lower. We've taken out this high now. Price has climbed back within the range. Price technically on the weekly is just in this very, very small range here. So if we take a look at this here, yeah, these are the conditions that we've got. We've got equal lows below. Yeah, we've got a bearish gap here on the daily that we want to see price close above. We close above this bullish gap, then we're aiming for the high here, which is at 2,788 roughly. And then obviously we've got the key level here at 2,854 that we're going to move for as well. As long as this gap holds though on a daily scale, then, I'm going to be cautious with longs here. But what I do like to see is we've got high, we've got the low, we've got a higher high, a higher low, a higher high, right? Higher low here as well. So we are holding market structure here on the daily, unlike Bitcoin. This is looking pretty strong. I think ETH probably due some form of resurgence here. So while we're holding through that here, all right, we see similar to this. We were looking for this bullish gap to hold. We got some nice longs off of this. We closed below it here, right? And then ultimately price selling off. This is still doing its job. Yeah. So these are adjoined gaps here. When it was closed below, when price violated it over here, we're now dealing with a 4-hour inversion set. Get rid of this one now. And we're dealing with a daily bearish gap, right? So daily close above this whole area turns into support. Goes from resistance into support. And that's what we want to see. All right, that's why at the moment it's just a little bit perilous here, because if we look at it like this, the clear and obvious gap below us is this one, bullish gap. So that's holding price. And this one above it is kind of rejecting price. Yeah. So for me, this is kind of just in a little bit of no man's land at the moment. So that's where we are with that one. Again, moves lower for buying off of these levels or down here in the weekly gap, or we want to see a clean breakout above this level here. Let's take a look at... Here we are. Right. So especially when you're looking at newer tokens like this, right, then these consolidations tend to be really, really key. All right. The consolidation that leads to these big pumps. We can see what happened when we retest this area here. We got that. Explained to everyone very, very clearly that I was a buyer at these levels and have added again since. All right. So this is not just based on a random chart. We have a fundamental team that look into this, that run due diligence. We understand the community, how active they are, the practical world application of the token, who the backers are behind it, the investment groups, etc. So we always want to try and take that fundamental as well as those news drivers and then overlay that with our technical analysis. No crypto other than some outliers are really going to catch a bid, whilst Bitcoin is dominating the market and the capital flow is not there for the riskier assets yet. So anything around about here for me is just a really interesting buy. All right. So the weekly doesn't tell us much. We have flushed out those levels now, right? So let's see what we're looking at on the daily. So the daily, the initial breakout that we were looking at was over here. We can see that in the green box, meaning that we were buyers through here, buyers through here. We've now lost this level, okay? And look at the strong breakdown that we had here. So that's weakness. The reason for that is if the market moves towards more of a risk-off sentiment. Again, we had the news, markets were looking pretty prosperous. We had the news from Trump about China and the fact that they apparently violated the trade agreement. That sent the markets tumbling. The capital runs a little bit out of risk markets into safer or defensive stocks, and crypto typically takes a really, really big hit, especially any of the low caps or the smaller projects. However, what we're looking at here has really, really good fundamentals behind it, a very, very good team and an active community, right? So, and by the way, if you want to know more about these, we have the team that review and does the due diligence and write these amazing fundamental reports are all available for Bird Nest members. If you want to get access to them, you can find information down in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you can't find anything, just reach out to me and I will send you the information you need. Right, so what does that mean? Well, this whole area is offering support. So now I want to see a deviation of this area here and down here as a positional play. I've happily added. right? I told you I added in here, and I told you if we do get the opportunity, which I didn't actually think that we would when we started to have this breakout here, money was starting to rotate a little bit more into risk assets. We saw ETH starting to gain the bids, but ultimately it didn't play out. Fine. Yes, yes, right? As our Polish friends say, it is what it is. So this was the level that we were looking at when we held here to break above this gap. And then I really think that it's go time. As for now, this has turned from support into resistance. Yeah, so if we take it from the point of the breakdown, which was here, and we now draw this across to here, we can see that we've gone into a point of resistance. So now the play is really simple. We see absorption here, strong breakout above this, right? This then becomes the deviation. Strong breakout here for price to test into this level. We wait for that market structure shift, and that's where we look to be buyers. All right, or we look to be active buyers on a lower time frame of any retests of the inversion. So we're going to leave that on there. I really want to drive this any lower because a 4 hour doesn't really do me any good here because I'm just going to buy this pumping into this level. But again, I think you've always got to have an eye on these type projects because when they can go incredibly aggressively. All right, so that's where we are on that one. What else did we get asked for? We got asked for Credi again, didn't we? I think Credi for Solana. Yeah, okay. So let's take a look at Credi. This is another project I really like, and this one is super healthy through here. Right, we've held the key levels we were discussing, came back down into this as well. Yeah, we had a little dip below this here, but ultimately this gap held out. And if you look back onto the show, I mean, I know we've got to go back a little while now, but this is what we were after. Right, these sweeps of gap lows, yeah, they're wicks, especially abnormally long wicks, into gaps, in this case a bullish gap. You know, this is a great target, especially when you leave this as equal lows. This is a failure swing, right? Not a swing failure. A swing failure is when price comes and takes a high or a low like this, fails to displace or close above it, ultimately gets brought back down into the range, and then you often see price seeking the next liquidity, which was ultimately this low. A failure swing is when price comes within a gnat's breadth, yeah, of taking out a low, but then recovers. These areas are often then attacked again. When you see this and you see a decent recovery like this, it's a very positive sign. So we were looking through here, this being a balanced price range, meaning we've got a bearish gap close through with a bullish gap, expected this to offer strong support, which it did wonderfully. We got a lovely kind of pump off of this. Unfortunately, we were just slamming into this inversion, right? Bullish gap, closed below. Remember, looking at this to offer resistance, that was support. What do we do? Got the bid, smashed up into this, came back down, inverted this again, meaning that this area then loses its point of reference because we've already gone through it twice, right? So as we close below this here, we expect the lows to be attacked. We did. We looked for this area here to hold, and this is really nice and strong, right? Because the reason for this area here, yeah, is looking through at this key SR. We've deviated this level a couple of times now, and each time we've done it, we've come back above, yeah? So found support in here, right? Got below it, resistance, yeah? Strong close above. Look how perfectly it added support, and then we got the buyers. Came back down to the area, we got the buyers again. Back down to the area, buyers again. Now, what I like about this even more is the fact that we've taken out the lows here, recovered it immediately, and now we're starting to pump again. So for me, this is a really key area. If I want to be a bit more pedantic, then what I can look at is saying, okay, well, this is the key area offering resistance now. So what does this mean? Well, it's quite simple. If we get this break above here now, we've got these perfect make liquidity targets here. We look to flip them, and then we just look to moon, right? Like this. So why this? We got liquidity resting above here and above here. This is the key point that's capping the market. How do we know that? Well, that was the bullish gap that was inverted. We found resistance here. We found resistance here. We've also found resistance here in a failure to close above. So maybe we're looking for a corrective move a little bit lower here before we see that expansion. But when we close above this here, ideally we don't take this out. We pull back to this area here. This is our first trade into these levels. We want to see how price reacts here. When price comes in and holds this level here, this is what we can then look to offer support and then for price to move up higher. Okay. So again, still really liking that. In terms of if there are any lower time frame plays that I would look to take, well, if we're going to get a pullback here to then lead to that daily close, this is the perfect spot. Okay, so we're going to draw this in here. This is our H4. Quite simply, price coming back into this area here, something like this on the lower time frame. And then we align ourselves with this plan here. All right, that's absolutely as clean as you like. Close below here, and I think we're coming back down for these lows and this gap. All right, but ultimately, I think, holding this area here and popping, I think good long plays from here. And again, good long plays when we close above here on the daily. Right, so let's take a look. What was the other one we got added on? Vert. Let's have a look at Vert. Right, so weekly, what do we see here? So we look at this, that this is obviously a daily level in here, as are these, but we're just looking at this more for the sake of the candles at the moment. I know it's a little bit messy, but I don't want to get rid of the stuff that's on there because, like I say, we have to hold ourselves accountable for the analysis. Well, we don't have to. You guys don't absolutely have to listen to me at all. I do appreciate every single one of you, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 of you turn out every show. But this never is financial advice. This is just purely a reflection of my years in the market, how I'm viewing these charts, where I'm taking positions and the way that I would trade them. So this was a really key area. Broke above this, looking for this to hold and push up. We didn't. We've come back down in here now. And ultimately, what are we doing? I like looking at the candle bodies and the wicks as well. They tell us a lot. So in here, look at the size of that upsize wick. Banana Republic, hello, mate. 2039, love it. So as we kind of push up from here, back down to here, you hold this. You should absolutely think about doing some kind of collaboration with Token 2049, by the way, Banana. That would be awesome. Seems ready-made for it, doesn't it? So as we go up from here, we didn't get that move. Fine. Look at the long rejection wick down, putting us back down below what we were looking to support. We closed here below it, so expecting price to flush out. Where's my downside target here for Vert, and where am I interested in this? Again, is at 0.14798,163. All right. So why is this an area of interest? Well, a couple of reasons. It's a wick, right? Inside a weekly gap. That's very, very interesting to me. Now, remember, when we're looking at these, the candles can often tell you quite a lot. So if we look at what happened here when we're in this consolidation, notice how we're attacking the highs, attack the high, close back in the range. Attack the high, close back in the range, right? Then when we close back, but all of these things, look, the body closes above this body, pushes higher. This body closes, pushes higher. Then we get this one here and we expect price to move higher, but it doesn't. And the body closes below. Look how then the next candle takes that candle's low. Yeah, the body telling us that it's heavy here and it's seeking liquidity lower. In the same vein, when we get this close above here, close above the body, we take the wick. So we expect price comes back down. We expect it to chill here. So the next day, we expect price, yeah, to attack this high. It actually doesn't. It drives up, comes back down, and then closes here. But do we take the low? Yeah. Do we take the high? We don't. So what we're looking for here is an inside day, meaning that the plan for this day on taking this high still sits intact. All right. You did not indeed, my friend. We are, in fact, that's going to be our very last one in a moment that we're going to finish up on. I hate it here. So we've come above here, then we've created this gap. Lovely, right? Large expansion candle. Why is this relevant? Well, look at the bodies here. Large wick to the upside, failed to displace above this high, close back in the range. Price moves up to try and take this wick and fails, but actually takes the wick low here. Then needs a long upside wick. This is showing you a lot of sell pressure. Then look what happens. This candle closes below that candle's body, meaning what? Meaning that then we expect this week, yeah, when this opens, this closes below. Open of this week, we expect this low to be taken and potentially lower. So that's what we're watching for at the moment. Moving this on to here, I'm going to get rid of this Fibonacci. We were just looking at this based on the expansion leg and the fact that price wasn't holding the golden pocket here, which can be seen as a sign of weakness. I'll show you that very quickly before I delete it. It was really funny as well because I remember when we came into this level here, this was on Wednesday's show, right? And I said to everyone, look, we've closed down, we're below the golden pocket now. I think this is a sign of weakness. And then when I finished the show and then just watched it overnight, I was like, shit, this thing's really starting. It looks like it's starting to catch a bid here. Ultimately, we're still below the gaps. We've mitigated this again. Remember, this was the Consolidation that led to the pump, price ripped through this, leaving a gap, meaning that it's not being respected. We then moved down to this area here, which was the consolidation before the rip. And then we start to see price holding here. So we're okay. But for me, I don't like seeing price really rip through the golden pocket on a Fibonacci. I don't know what it is. Yes, crypto can be a little bit less clean, but not on the higher time frames. This here just showed no respect at all. A candle like this, slightly higher up, wicking into it, I think maybe we see a reaction here. But anyway, that's the reason that the fib was there. Even if you were a buyer in here, when you come back down below these levels, you can be pretty certain that price is then failing this and then looking for these lows. Right, so we'll just go back to the daily. I just wanted to explain that I don't like deleting things off these charts. It just gives everybody, if you ever want it, I don't expect you to, but if you ever wanted it, there's always a visual 2-week process every week, every Monday, every Wednesday, explaining my thoughts on the charts, where I'm looking to take positions, where I'm not. So you can always go back through them and think, okay, actually, I understand what BC was talking about here. He was looking at this area here. Fine. No, he didn't get the longs he was looking for. Or maybe he got stopped out the longs he was looking for. But then this is the theory as to why he's moved to a short position, right? So with this one, same thing, right? We can see here now on the daily what we were looking for. Price coming into this level, we got that initial pump, and I really did think when we came back above this level here that we were pretty nailed on to take out these highs. Again, we didn't. This candle here told us everything we needed to know. It was a ginormous, almost a Marabuza, which is like a candle that doesn't have wicks, really, just this gigantic body. It's not quiet, but it is a big bearish engulfing candle, right? So when we look at that here, we're kind of saying, okay, well, yeah, it's just one big candle here, but actually look at what it also symbolizes. Yeah, so we've come up higher high, higher low, but this is now a lower high, and we've had this huge rejection here, kind of out of nowhere, really. There's no high been taken, you know, there's no real gapping in here that we should look for. So when this comes back down, you've then got a pre-made target that lets you get back into the market. Close above this, look for this area to be retested, or even up to 50% of it, and then let it rip. Until you get that, has to be an assumption that this is setting a lower high, right? Then when you see the bearish engulfing candle here, this kind of had a double-edged sword for me, right? Because I didn't want to be actively short this because we had this big, beautiful bullish gap. So when would I be looking to actively short this? And I wasn't. I'm not an active shorter of this because these are positions that I'm looking to hold for long term, right? So as we kind of came up here, you're watching the portfolio go up, you know, been very, very active buyers since these levels down here, right? So like I say, for me, I'm adding in because I bought again at these levels here. I'm going to buy again if we get back down to this level here. And obviously, if we get back down to here as well, this is based on the fundamental understanding, the understanding of the project, the team, what they're trying to do in the space, the narrative as well. Obviously, as you can tell in the name, with Vert AI, and the wonderful people that I fortunately have in my team that keep me informed of all these things a lot better than I ever could. All right. So as we're looking at this here, this is just another buy zone for me. But if I'm looking at this from a technical standpoint, this was the point when we closed below here that I'm like, okay, I think we're now shifting off down here. This has been used a million times over. It was really, really good because why was it? Well, bullish. This was the bullish gap. Man, we rejected it here. Then we got the strong close above, and this area just was playing such a key role in supporting price. We closed back below it now, retested it, and we're selling off. For me, it's just had too much price action go through it. I'd rather take it off the chart and put something more relative on there, which would be, say, like this gap here. But I expect price to come back down into these levels here, and this is definitely where I'm looking to be, to just add some more to the position. Ultimately, look, we zoom out of this one. When this thing goes, right, even if it makes an attempt, and let's just say the average buy-in is here. So I've been buying down here, but I also bought up here. Let's just slap it right in the middle here, back at this green box, and say, if we get the upside towards the all-time high, it's 595% move, right? If you get it halfway up the thing, when you start taking some profits, a 300% move. So it's just, you know, if you find enough of these projects that have got the good backers, good communities, good fundamentals, good drivers, you've got good investments on it and stuff like that as well. And you can find amazing free content out there as well. And you can also find content over at the Nest that will help you with these fundamental understandings, right? Then that's what you're buying into. The technicals are just showing you the levels that you're looking to buy. It's very different to, say, intraday trading, where you're looking, or momentum trading, where you're looking for news to catalyze reactions, but you're not looking to hold these things long term. You don't really, sounds horrible, you don't really care about the team, the project, the stock. Do I care if it's Tesla or, you know, whatever, AMD, or do I care if it's Fartcoin or whatever? No. If I'm intraday trading, I'm looking for a very different set of catalysts. But for my portfolio, I'm looking for key levels to buy here because my belief is, even if it doesn't happen in this cycle, that in later cycles, buying at these levels ultimately pays really, really big dividends when you're working with exceptionally good projects. Okay. And we're going to finish on Solana, for I hate it here, who hopefully is still with us, bless him. He's waited so very patiently. So Solana, probably one of our funkier charts when we look at it in terms of all the TA, because there's been a lot going on with this. And there's also a lot of drivers behind this as well. No, don't forget to ask yourself that. Look at all the meme seasons. Look at how Solana really took the spotlight as the ecosystem. Look at just that whole kind of buzz behind Sol. I even had one of the best fundamental analysts I've ever met was telling me how they were using Solana BTC, how they used to use ETH BTC, right? Really, really interesting, right? To just see those resurgences, because ETH was flat for a long time. Anyway, actionable setups today on ETH. So what are we doing? Holding this bullish gap still. So I'm happy. I'm always happy if we're still in a gap, right? This is a daily one here, but if we move it up to here, you can see that we're still holding the weekly one as well. I'm going to leave that there for the daily because we moved down, because I think that probably has more relevance if we've left it on the chart there. Ultimately, we ground up to our key level of resistance here. Notice how when we were looking at it before, it's either a gap. Yeah, I much prefer gaps, highs and lows, but if we've got a key order block as well like this, this is another area, because the up move here before that huge sell-off was obviously a key area of interest. So plans really simply on a week, or really simple on a weekly scale. If we hold this level here, high or low, come back above here, close above this high, close above this gap. I think this thing's absolutely moons, by the way. I really do think that. I just think if you look at capital flows, I think if you look at what's going on in the US economy, world economies, if you look at the money printing that's going on, the fiscal stimulus that we've got from everything across Europe, you look at the DAX setting new all-time highs, you look at the fact that the US haven't even put the money printers on, haven't even really started the major part of the bond or the debt buyback. I really do think we're in for a very, very explosive upside still this year. I don't think it's necessarily going to be particularly long. I'm not sure the alt season plays out like people think that it used to. You need to be a lot more selective and look at capital rotations, things like that, right? But ultimately, that's why I'm just such a keen position trader in this bull market. I haven't been the best at that previously. I've always traded it rather than invested. But I really do think we're having that anyway, before I go too off topic. What's the weekly telling me? Well, big effing ugly candle here that closed below this candle's low. So I expect this candle to move down lower, but we've already got that. We're already into the low of that. So it doesn't really tell me much. All right. So on a weekly scale, we're holding this massive gap, weekly gap. This also reflected as a daily gap, which we're going to look at here. Excuse me. So again, look, why the gaps can be so important in your trading, right? Bearish gap, resistance, close above it, turns purple. It obviously doesn't. I turn it purple. And then price comes back down into here. This is where we're looking at support. Simple. Expansion. Remember what I said to you? Look for the moves from expansion. Look for the order block to set. Look for old highs to be closed above. Then what are we looking at? We don't see this as a failure and a deviation. Though. Look at the bloody wicks. Wicks are getting bought up here aggressively. As long as this holds, we look higher, right? And you might get stopped out on a couple of position trades or a couple of intraday trades or whatever. Don't worry about it. When it closes below here, think this to yourself. Price of an asset is all about its value, or its perceived value, or its fair value, right? And fair is a bit of a subjective term, but if you look at like auction market theory and stuff like that, market auction theory. But ultimately, you're just looking at where a price is, where a price for a product is accepted, right? Meaning that when you see price come down to these key levels, that's why support and resistance work so well, for example. When price comes back down to these levels, this was clearly too cheap. Spent very little time out there, got back up into here. This is where people were selling previously, right? So if people were selling it here, it means that they don't consider it value above it. Until you get the close above it in this area holds, people now see this asset at value. Means that it has more value. Maybe it has a restrictive supply. Maybe the market conditions are there where more people are looking to buy it. Therefore, supply and demand. Very, very simple. Yeah, so the demand is there. Yeah. So what happens? Price moves up to the next point of supply, which was here. This was the next key point of sell-off. So now we're looking for this area to hold, for market to tell us that people accept that Solana is value at, say, $146. We use the gaps here because these strong bids normally come in from institutions, from people with major asset and getting capital to deploy. So when you get that, or a large collective of buyers, yeah, so all retail steps in at the same point. These gaps then give people the ability to get back on board, right? As they come back in, buying. This is where we get the move higher. So now look at the difference that we've got here. We had this little gap here, but it's not as clear and obvious, right? You can utilize different time frames as well, by the way, to help you with that. So if you don't like this being double gap, then you can move to say a 3-day chart where you might have a gap there, or a 2-day chart, for etc. Just, for me, I like to keep it really simple. While we were holding this area, we're just trapped between resistance and support. So what does it become? A range. You're just ping-ponging around. You're selling the highs, you're buying the lows. And then you go to buy the lows here, and price just completely dumps out the bottom of it. Fine. What do? You just chill. This has now become an inversion, and it's quite an important one, in my opinion, because it offered support for so long. So we can now see, and again, this is moving it from more of an intraday purpose, that price is holding this level. I'm happy with this here. Right, we're going to look at the plan that was laid out here on the 4-hour, obviously, in a minute as well. We're holding the gap here. So from here, I'm really not looking to be an active seller, right? Because we're holding a big bullish gap. Yes, we're holding this bearish gap here, which is keeping price suppressed, meaning that from a positional standpoint, I want to see price back above this here. I think we get back above this here, we deviate the low of the range, we climb back in. I'm happy to take trades back up to this area of resistance. And now we've rebalanced this whole area here, this wick. Yeah, means that we've traded through it. I think we could really carve through it as we move higher. So how does that all play out with what we're looking at here? Quite simply, the two plans were this. Close above this here, we trade to the highs. Once we hold below, we look for retests and we sell off. And what do we get? We got one followed by the other. Price was obviously closed below here, no problem, right? Price got the retest here, so we get the intraday trades to the low, right? Maybe you make some money on those, maybe you didn't. Personally, wasn't particularly up for shorting this anyway. I was explaining this because I was looking for this to just move to these levels to look to buy, right? Okay, for positional players. But then we got the close above as we dictated here, meaning that we're looking for price to take down these highs and then look to grind its way higher. So now, if I'm asking myself, is this ready for a move higher? I don't need to second guess that. I literally look at this gap and I say, while this gap is offering resistance, no. If we close above it, we look for the close above. What have we done? Higher, higher. Higher low. If we get the close above here, then we look for it to take that level out, grind through the resistance that we've got here, yeah, and keep going higher. If at any of these stages we see rejection, we have perfect places to take profit. We'd look to enter trades from here with the first target of this. If we flush back out down to here, we can stop ourselves out at entry after taking a small amount of profit and look to go again if we get the entry again. If we don't and we violate, if we don't and we re-violate this to the downside, yeah, then we look lower towards these lows because that's where the next liquidity is resting. All right. Anyway, guys, I think we're going to call it a day. There were a couple of minutes past. We got a live trading session to start with members very shortly, for which we're going to be looking at some potential entries across cryptocurrency as well as the NASDAQ today. So we're going to go and get that set up for everyone. But I really do hope you enjoy the show today. Please do like the YouTube post or wherever you are. Please do comment if you'd like to comment, if you can, and you do enjoy the content. It really does help the algorithm find us, and I very, very rarely do this, but if you can give me a follow, I will be running some competitions soon, so please do let me know. But yeah, if you find me on there, you can see the name on there, BC_Richfield, and you can find me over at the Burb Nest with the wonderful and mercurial crypto Burb. So stay safe, keep an eye on the news today. Remember, we do have that coming out very shortly, actually, in about 12 minutes. We're going to see how that kind of affects the market intraday. Apart from that, remember, one last thing I'll say, is sometimes just take a little bit of time to zoom out, compress your chart in. Sometimes as well helps to just get rid of all the annotations, especially if you've got as many as those. And just say to yourself, look, make life really clean and simple. Look at this chart immediately and kind of say, okay, if you're somebody that's looking for recovery of market structure, just be patient and wait for price to get back and take out these highs. If you're looking for early stage moves, then look for these gaps here, right, to hold and for price to move up, or look for this gap here, for example, yeah, to be violated, get back above here, and all the TAs on the chart. Michael, hello, mate. I didn't see you in there. You're very welcome. Ozzy, see you in a bit indeed, my friend. We'll see you in there for the live trading. Let's see if we can catch some bangers. We're going to run through that MA system again today as well, see if we can get on some momentum if any of these things pop. To each and every else in here, thank you very much for your time. Really do appreciate you joining these shows. I'm actually going to be taking a short break over this weekend. I'm going to go away with Yuki. We've got a beautiful little cottage along the Suffolk coast that we disappear to just to kind of get some headspace and refresh. It's been a busy season. I'll still be available for you guys, but there won't be a live show on Monday, so we'll be back on Wednesday. All right, and for the rest of you, I'll see you around the nest. Take care, guys.